We have been exploring together, as I said earlier, some of the concepts in a book written by Arthur Brooks and Oprah Winfrey, a book on building a happier life, building the life you want. We've taken a look at the idea that happiness isn't really the goal we ought to be working toward, that happiness is not where we were wanting to focus. We were wanting to focus on how do we become happier. That happier is a direction, and that is a much more powerful component to building a better life for ourselves. We explored the importance of what I call emotional intelligence or emotional IQ, the ability to understand what it is, to understand and name what it is we are feeling and experiencing in our life in response to whatever is happening. And the reality that many people are actually quite emotionally illiterate. If you stop and ask yourself, how many emotions can you really name? How many feelings are you aware that you can have? Most people are not able to name a whole lot of them, and yet research suggests that we are capable of well over 80 different nuances of emotion. And where that ties into building a better life for ourselves is if we don't understand what it is that's really going on inside of us, what we're really feeling, and if we can't really name it, then it becomes really difficult to understand what's going on. It becomes really difficult to make a request of another to help us or to support us. So growing in these fashions and in this way is important. And then last week, we began to look at some of the research that suggests that there are 4 pillars to creating a more satisfying life experience. And we looked at 2 pillars last week. Those 2 pillars coming out of research in sociology are the importance of family. And I shared with you that I really liked how they called it building your imperfect family, reminding us that there's no such thing as a perfect family, that there's challenges in every family, and yet there are things that we can learn to do to create a happier family environment and relationships. And then the second pillar that we looked at last week was the pillar of friendship, how important it is that we have meaningful connections in our lives, that it doesn't have to be a lot of people, but we have to have those in our lives with whom we can really be ourselves, our best selves and our not so best selves, that we can show up in our full authenticity, and that person or those couple of people can really see who we are and believe in us and encourage us and support us. And now we're going to look today at the last couple of those pillars. So it was it was family and it was friends. And then the other 2 pillars are work and faith. So we're going to look at work, we're going to look at faith, and then we're going to look at the final idea that they write about in how to build a happier life or the life that you want. So work. I remember when I first read Khalil Gibran's book, The Prophet, many years ago. It was pretty early into my ministerial work. I was taken by the way he wrote about so many things, and in particular, the way he wrote about work, because I had this concept of work as just something you had to do as a responsible adult to earn the money that you needed to provide at least for your basic needs. And in Gibran's piece on work, the phrase, work is love made visible, really struck a chord with me. It was like, oh, work is something more. It's not repetition. It's not drudgery. It has the potential, at least, to be something more significant. Work is love made visible. In the book, they write, meaningful work is key to creating a fulfilling life. Research has found there is no clear relationship between job satisfaction and the actual type of job one holds. That's an important point. That's an important point. I think that we maybe have done a bit of disservice to our younger generation if we have not painted a clearer, more realistic and authentic description of what work really is. I think sometimes we have overemphasized you've got to find the one right job, right? What do we say to young people, from about maybe high school and definitely toward the end of high school and going into college? What do you want to do? What do you want? And what we're really saying is, how are you going to make a living? What job are you going to go pursue, as if there was just maybe one right job? Mindfulness, important idea here. Research has found there's no clear relationship between job satisfaction and the actual type of work that one does. They reference this in a 2018 survey. The happiest jobs had nothing in common. Nothing in common. Teaching assistant, quality assurance analyst, net developer, marketing specialist. Happiness depends on you, not your specific job, right? Happiness depends on you, not your specific job. And when we talk about work, some of us are still working for a living. We're not in our retirement years. But work is not just what we do for a living. It's how we invest ourselves. How we invest ourselves, how we use the time that we have, the energy we have, the skills we have, the knowledge we have. And that comes into play whether we are still in our earning years or are in our years of retirement. I remember the story of the 3 bricklayers that I learned many years ago. Story about a traveler who is journeying, and he comes upon 3 bricklayers. And he stops and he asks the question of the very first bricklayer, who is just laying brick after brick after brick, looks really exhausted, really just not very happy. And he asks the bricklayer, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm just laying brick one after another, one after another. It's hard work, but that's my job." And he looked exhausted. The traveler goes on and he sees the second bricklayer. And he says to that bricklayer, that one's a little more enthusiastic. He's laying the brick, but it's so one brick at a time, one brick at a time. And he says to that second bricklayer, "What are you doing?" And that bricklayer says, "Well, I'm building a wall. And, it's not the greatest thing to be doing, but I take pride in my work, and I'm really paying attention, and at least it pays the bills, and I'm building this wall." And the traveler goes on a little bit further, and he meets the third bricklayer, who's humming, laying bricks just like the first and the second one were laying, but he's humming along and he's laying bricks. And the traveler says to him, "And what are you doing?" And he says, "I am building a magnificent cathedral, a place that's going to be a place of worship for generations to come, where people will find sanctuary and inspiration and instruction." They were all building the same thing, working on the same thing, working with the same bricks, picking one up after the other, placing them. But were they having the same experience? Are you there this morning? Were they having the same? No, they were not having the same experience. What was the variable? Their attitude, right? They were the variable. It was the same bricks. It was the same physical, external thing they were doing. But what they brought to it was very different. And part of the reason it was very different is how they saw themselves in the picture. In one, it was just the repetition. In the other, it was repetition, a little bit of pride of work. But in the third, what did the third bricklayer have that the other 2 didn't seem to have? Vision, a sense of purpose, right? A sense of purpose. They were all building the same thing, but they all weren't connecting what they were physically doing with the overarching purpose. The overarching purpose. When we have a sense that what we are doing matters, the doing of it becomes much more enjoyable. Whether it's something we're doing in our retirement years or it's something we're doing for pay. When we have a sense that there's a purpose in it, that someone other than ourselves and just us paying our bills is benefiting, we feel better about it. In the book, they give some good advice. Rather than relentlessly pursuing a perfect match career, and that's what I think we have to watch for in helping to bring up the next generation, that we're not creating that mindset that there is a perfect match career. They say, rather than relentlessly pursuing a perfect match career, a better approach is to remain flexible on the exact job while searching for two important things. To remain flexible on the exact job while searching for two big things. And the two things that they identify, so you can be doing the same work, but what's important are these two things, the research suggests, is the idea of earned success. Earned success. Choosing to get better at whatever it is you are doing. Earned success. The feeling of satisfaction. Have you ever done something that was hard for you to do at the start, but you stayed with it until you were able to do it, until you got better at it? Nod your head if you've had that experience. How does that feel to you? It feels good, right? No matter what it is. It could be a hobby. It could be solving a really big issue or problem at work. Whatever it is, when we experience having accomplished something, having broken through a difficulty, without it being dependent upon external reward for it. That's the important piece. Without it being dependent upon external reward for it. That we just feel good that we accomplished it. The reward may or may not come. The accolades may or may not come. The raise may or may not come. It doesn't mean we're not deserving of those things. We probably are. But when we focus on improving for improvement's sake alone, for our own growth's sake alone, that's where the satisfaction comes in. That's what helps to build a better life, a happier life, because we are growing in the process of whatever it is we are putting our God-given time and gifts and talents into. And the second big piece that they say is service to others. Service to others. So when we choose to get better at whatever it is that we are doing, so that we can experience some earned success, that we've earned it for ourselves. We've gotten better at this or faster at that, or more creative, or fewer errors, whatever it may be, earned success. And that what it is we are doing has an element of service to others, benefiting others. That's what makes the difference in what we would call a better match. A better match. They warn against the challenge of being addicted to our jobs and feeling as if our whole sense of identity comes from the things that we do, and to remind ourselves that we are not the things that we do. Those are just things we do. That we are a full composite, mind, body, and spirit, that we have a spark of the divine within us that is meant to be shared, and meant to be shared in such a way that it inspires those around us. We are not our jobs, but our jobs can be a way that we make love visible, that we make love visible. The encouragement, they say, is to reflect on your current work situation. If you're still in your earning years, to reflect on your current work situation and consider ways to make it more fulfilling. How can you be more like that third bricklayer? What can you tweak or change so it feels more satisfying to you? I had a conversation with a young person in my life this past week. I was asking about some of her hopes and dreams, and I was asking her about how work was going. And she is a young woman, very educated, very committed to making the world a better place. She works in a company that, a nonprofit company, a large nonprofit company though, that is all about environmental awareness and products, but it's very much at the higher level of influencing governmental policy and procedures to help make sure that we take better care of the planet and make better choices in how we use our resources. And the work alone that she described seems to me to be quite rewarding. But there was something that she shared with me. She said, I'm paid well, and I know that what I'm doing makes a difference, but I only recently discovered why I was not feeling very satisfied. And she said, it's because I miss the hands-on direct work of making a difference. And so I'm still going to do the job that I care about and that I'm getting well paid for. But I need that hands-on experience where I really feel like I am in there making a difference. And then she blew me away because she said, and so I'm going to start picking up trash every single week wherever I am. Now take that in for just a moment. You can't get much more hands-on than that, can you? I mean, really, can you get much more hands-on than that? Excuse me, in trying to just literally, right, clean up the environment? So it was at full spectrum, and I thought, this is a piece of what the authors are writing about, reflecting on our current situation. And again, we can apply this whether we are still in our earning years or in our retirement years. How can we bring more into the situation, into whatever we're doing, more of what really matters to us? When we build our lives more on purpose, that's when we feel happiest. That's when we feel happiest. We may not be privileged to find, quote, that perfect job where everything lines up and we feel recognized and rewarded and compensated and all of that. And we love every person we work with and everything we do. That's not very realistic. Would you not agree? So how do we make the best of what it is that we are doing? And it all goes back to us. It always does, doesn't it? That's at the heart and core of what we teach in metaphysics, that it all begins where? Within us, within us. It's who we are in the relationship. It's who we are in the creativity. It's who we are in the family. It's who we are in the work that we do. And that is entirely up to us. That's entirely our skillful behavior and our choice. So they said the 4 pillars: family, friends, work that is meaningful, work that is satisfying, work where you feel like you are somehow contributing in a positive way. And then the 4th is this idea of faith. And they make it very clear that the way they speak of faith is the way we speak of spirituality. That it's not religion, it is spirituality. It is that feeling of transcendence, that awareness that, yes, we have this physical body. We have this life experience we have been born into, the place that we were born, the time that we were born, the circumstances in which we were born. And that all molds and shapes a lot of who and what we are, but not all of it. And that we recognize that there is something more to us and more to life, a transcendent experience. It is what some people refer to as grace. They begin the chapter in the book on faith with writing about the best known, most beloved hymn in Christianity. Do you know what it is? Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace. Even if we in Unity don't quite agree with all of the way it's languaged, I think we get the essence of what that song is about. It was written by John Newton in the 1770s. He had been a merchant. He trafficked in enslaved people. He transported enslaved people. And the story behind how the song Amazing Grace, how he came to write that song, was that on one of his voyages back to London, there was a horrible storm on the sea. A storm came. It took out quite a few of his fellow sailors on the ship, but he was spared. And he wondered, he had lived such a wretched life, such a life bereft of any sort of nobility or morals or spiritual concepts or religious concepts. But he really, the story goes, he really reflected on why was he spared and so many others weren't. Why was he spared and so many others weren't? And he came to believe that he was spared because God had a plan for his life, that he was to do something good with his life. And he'd fundamentally changed his ways. He became a clergyman, he married, he became an ardent abolitionist. He wrote Amazing Grace. That hymn speaks of this idea of the transcendent mystery, the transcendent nature that we live, move, and have our being in, even if we are not paying attention to it. And for those of us who believe that, for those of us who understand that, it adds so much texture and richness to our life experience. There is more to life than what we can just measure. It is that spiritual element, that transcendent element, that mystical element. I know I'm speaking, at least I hope I'm speaking to the choir here. In the book, I guess they feel a need to explain how this stuff is not woo-woo stuff. And they cite some examples, one of which a study that had been done on some Carmelite nuns, tracking their brains with EEG technology, asking the Carmelite nuns to reflect and recall some of the most mystical experiences they had in meditation or in prayer, and that the researchers were going to measure the brainwave activity as the Carmelite nuns were asked to recall these very mystical experiences. And if you've ever had a mystical experience, I'll tell you what often happens is you don't know how to put it into words, because it's not of the normal, ordinary kinds of things that we experience. So it's so hard to know how to put it into words, but you know it when you've experienced it. The interesting thing in studying these Carmelite nuns hooked up to the EEG machines as they were asked to recall some of their most vivid, mystical, transcendent experiences is that their theta waves were off the chart. They were in a very different state of being. A state of being, theta waves are a state of mind activity in which we are much more attuned with other elements of knowledge and wisdom than we ordinarily have access to. In the book, they suggest that there are some reasons that we have difficulty with this understanding this transcendent experience. They say that challenges we have are that we have not learned how to focus our minds, that we haven't found our path, and that we're not holding the right motives. I would have to agree with them that part of the reason that it can be difficult to experience this kind of faith, this kind of transcendence, is because of challenges with focusing the mind, is because of difficulty in finding our path, or not understanding the right, or I would prefer to use the word, purer motive. We've talked in Unity for years. It's certainly emphasized in Buddhist practice the idea of learning how to train the monkey mind. That's the mind that as soon as we say, I'm going to sit down and meditate, I'm going to get nice and quiet, I'm going to close my eyes, I'm going to focus my attention on my breathing, and then all heaven breaks loose in that mind. Has anybody had that experience? You go, why am I thinking these thoughts right now? Or why are these thoughts thinking me right now? And then we start to grab at them, right? Part of the practice is not grabbing at them, but just noticing them and letting them go by as if they were leaves that have fallen on a stream and are just carried away. Certainly one way of practicing, quieting the mind, focusing the monkey mind. They write about this, and this might be helpful for you to know. They write, if mindfulness, this idea of training the monkey mind, is so great, then why aren't all of us practicing it every day? Why are we still spending so much time romanticizing or regretting the past and anticipating the future? The answer is that mindfulness is not natural, and it's actually quite hard. Many psychologists believe that as a species, humans are not evolved who enjoy the here and now. Rather, we are wired to think about the past and especially the future. Avoiding mindfulness can also be an effective way to distract yourself from pain. Researchers have shown that people's minds are significantly more likely to wander when they're in a negative mood than when they're in a positive mood. All that suggests to me is it gives an explanation to me for why it might be difficult to do this, but it doesn't give me an excuse for not practicing, for devoting that time on a regular basis to quieting the mind, to stilling the stream of thought, to withholding judgment and critique of how we're doing it, to give ourselves credit just for making the time to practice. If it was automatic or easy, they wouldn't call it a practice, right? They wouldn't call it a practice. So they say that part of the challenge that we might have in this more spiritual approach to our living has to do with untrained minds. A second, they say, has to do with our not finding our path. One of the things I love and respect about unity is we don't claim to be the right path. We claim to be a path. And we, more than that, say, find a path that makes sense to you. Find a path that you resonate with, something that makes sense, these are my words now, to your mind, your heart, and your soul. And then dig deep into that practice, and you will grow spiritually. You will have more of those opportunities to experience more of a transcendent energy in your life. I had a chuckle when they say, getting started finding your path does not mean going on a 30-day silent retreat. Can you imagine if you've never done any sort of meditation and you say, okay, I'm suddenly going to, 2025 is my year to get spiritual. I'm going to go on a 30-day silent retreat. How well do you think that would go? It would be an interesting challenge. It's probably not the wisest way to start. And I smiled too, and they said, kind of just sneak into a church service somewhere, sit in the back. And I wanted to say, near the exit doors so you can leave, if you need to. But they give a real good suggestion on how to approach it, right? Just check it out. You'll know what is right for you. So they say that one of the challenges is that we haven't found the right path for us. So if you're still looking, that's okay. But find something. It's there for you. Find a teaching and a community that really feels right to you, and then work it so that you can benefit from the growth there. And when they talk about the challenge of the right motivation, they say that the work that we do spiritually is it is for us to grow, but it's got to be beyond just making our own individual life better. It's got to be connected to something beyond us. That's the transcendent nature of it. And then the very last thing that they write about in the book, and I'm only going to mention it, I'll refer you back to it, is that we can kind of tie all of these teachings up with a beautiful bow when we make a decision to take some of what we are learning and to share it, to teach it. Whenever you attempt to share or teach what you've learned with another, it becomes stronger in you. So I used to say to folks that wanted to work in, say, Youth Village, teaching unity concepts to children, you will grow as much, if not more, than the little ones, because in order to be able to share it and teach it in a way that another can understand, especially a child, it has to grow in you and become clearer and stronger in you. So I hope that in this journey that there have been some phrases or ideas that have stood out to you that are particularly helpful to you in where you are in your life and what's important to you and what you want to build in your life. The tools are there. All we need to do is pick them up and use them consistently to the best of your ability. And I hope you'll do that. Namaste.